My name is Pierce Sterling, and I used to think my biggest problem was explaining high-frequency trading to people at dinner parties. Turns out, my biggest problem was sitting across from me at breakfast, scrolling through her phone with the same intensity she once reserved for looking at me. "Another client meeting tonight," Helena announced without looking up, her manicured fingers dancing across the screen. "Donovan says we need to discuss the boutique's legal structure." I nodded, sipping my coffee and watching her lie with the practiced ease of someone who'd been doing it for months. Helena Sterling, 42 years old, owner of an upscale boutique called Refined, had been meeting with her lawyer an awful lot lately. What she didn't know was that I'd already figured out these weren't business meetings. The morning sun streamed through our glass-walled home in Newton, Massachusetts, highlighting the cold perfection Helena had insisted on when we'd bought the place 5 years ago. Everything was white, chrome, and expensive. Just like her affair, I supposed. "Will you be late?" I asked, already knowing the answer. "Probably very late. You know how these legal things drag on." She finally looked at me, her green eyes holding that familiar mixture of condescension and impatience. "Try not to wait up. I know you have your little computer games to play tomorrow." My little computer games. That's what she called my work as a quantitative analyst at Meridian Capital. What Helena didn't realize was that my little computer games involved moving millions of dollars through complex algorithmic trades, and that I'd recently been promoted to senior partner with a compensation package that would make her head spin. But I'd kept that information to myself. "Of course," I said mildly. "I'll probably just tinker around in the home office." Helena stood, smoothing down her designer dress. At 42, she was still striking. Auburn hair, perfect figure maintained by expensive personal trainers, and a wardrobe that cost more than most people's cars. She'd built her boutique into a successful business catering to Boston's elite women, and somewhere along the way, she'd started believing she was one of them. "Oh, and Pierce?" She paused at the kitchen doorway. "Mara's coming by the shop today. She mentioned you looked tired at the Henderson party last weekend. Maybe you should get more sleep instead of staying up all night with those screens." Mara. Helena's best friend and the most toxic person I'd ever met. Mara Chen was the type of woman who measured her worth by other people's misery, and she'd never liked me. The feeling was mutual. "I'll keep that in mind," I said. After Helena left, I sat in the silence of our perfect kitchen and allowed myself a small smile. She thought she was so clever, so careful. But Helena had forgotten one crucial detail about living with someone who worked in financial analysis. I noticed patterns. The legal meetings always happened on Tuesdays and Thursdays. They always ran late, and they always coincided with charges on our joint credit card at the Fairmont Copley Plaza Hotel bar. Helena thought I didn't check our statements, but I'd been tracking every expense for months. I walked to my home office, a space Helena rarely entered because it was too cluttered with my monitors and trading equipment. She had no idea that from this cluttered room, I managed portfolios worth hundreds of millions of dollars. My phone buzzed. A text from Nina Rodriguez, the only person in this whole mess I actually trusted. Nina tended bar at Murphy's Pub in downtown Boston, but don't let that fool you. She had a master's degree in computer science and a talent for gathering information that would make the FBI jealous. "Coffee later? I have news about your situation." I texted back, "Usual place, 1 hour." Nina had been helping me document Helena's affair, though helping was probably the wrong word. Nina was more like a co-conspirator. She'd been the one to suggest I start recording Helena's phone calls, the one who'd taught me how to recover deleted text messages, and the one who'd discovered that Donovan Price, Helena's lawyer, had a reputation for sleeping with his female clients. An hour later, I sat across from Nina at a small cafe near Boston Common. Nina was 38, with short black hair and the kind of sharp intelligence that most people missed because she chose to work in a bar. She'd been my friend since college, one of the few people who'd stuck around when I'd married Helena. Your wife's lawyer is in trouble, Nina said without preamble, sliding a manila folder across the table. I opened it to find photocopies of Bar Association complaint forms, bank records, and what looked like correspondence between Donovan and several other women. How did you get these? Donovan's paralegal, Jessica, drinks at Murphy's, heavily, especially after bad days at work. Nina grinned. Turns out your wife isn't his first client romance. Jessica's been documenting everything because she's tired of cleaning up his messes. I studied the papers. Donovan Price was 46, divorced twice, and apparently made a habit of seducing wealthy female clients. According to the documents, he was currently under investigation for misappropriating client funds and had already received 2 formal warnings about inappropriate relationships. This is perfect, I murmured. Gets better. Helena's been telling everyone at that boutique of hers that you're basically unemployed. Mara's been spreading rumors that you're some kind of husband who plays video games all day. I felt a familiar cold anger settle in my chest. Is that so? Jessica heard Donovan laughing about it. Said Helena told him you make maybe $40,000 a year doing computer stuff, and that she'll take you for everything in the divorce. I closed the folder and looked at Nina. They think I'm poor. Worse, they think you're pathetic. That evening, I sat in my office and made a decision. Helena wanted to play games? Fine. But she'd forgotten something important about games. You need to know the rules before you start playing. I opened my laptop and began documenting everything. Every hotel charge, every suspicious phone call, every late-night legal meeting. I pulled my employment records, my tax returns, my investment statements. Then I called my own lawyer, not some sleazy divorce attorney, but Margaret Chen, one of Boston's most respected family law practitioners. Pierce, it's been years, Margaret said when she answered. What can I do for you? I need to discuss a divorce, Margaret, and I need to discuss it quietly. 3 weeks later, Helena was practically glowing with confidence. She'd been spending money like water, new clothes, expensive dinners, a weekend trip to New York that she claimed was for boutique business. What she didn't know was that I'd been documenting every purchase, every lie, every moment of her increasingly brazen affair. I'm meeting Donovan again tonight, she announced over breakfast, not even bothering to look up from her phone. He says we're close to finalizing the business restructuring. Restructuring? I asked mildly. You wouldn't understand. It's complicated legal stuff. She finally glanced at me, her expression a mixture of pity and annoyance. Maybe you should think about finding a better job, Pierce. Something more substantial. I almost laughed. Helena had no idea that my insubstantial job had just netted me a bonus larger than her boutique's entire annual revenue. I'll consider it, I said. That afternoon, I met Nina at Murphy's pub. The lunch crowd was thin, mostly business people grabbing quick meals before heading back to their offices. Nina poured me a beer and leaned across the bar. Jessica's ready to talk, she said quietly. Donovan's been using client trust funds to pay for his hotel rooms. She's got documentation going back 6 months. And she's willing to testify? She's willing to do more than that. She wants him gone. Apparently, he's been promising her a promotion for 2 years while taking credit for her work. I nodded. Set up a meeting. 2 days later, I sat in a small conference room with Jessica Martinez, Donovan's paralegal. She was younger than I'd expected, maybe 28, with tired eyes and the kind of nervous energy that came from working for someone you despised. Mr. Price has been stealing from client accounts, she said without preamble, sliding a thick folder across the table. Small amounts, usually under $5,000 at a time, but it adds up. He uses the money for personal expenses, hotels, restaurants, gifts for women. I opened the folder. Inside were bank records, credit card statements, and detailed notes in Jessica's careful handwriting. Why come forward now? Because he's getting sloppy, and because he promised me a partnership track that was never real. Jessica's voice hardened. He's been telling people I'm just a secretary. Meanwhile, I'm the one doing all the actual legal work while he plays around with married clients. You know about Helena. I know about all of them. Your wife isn't special, Mr. Sterling. She's just the latest. Jessica pulled out another set of papers. But she might be the most delusional. She's been calling the office, demanding that Mr. Price prioritize her case because she's going to be very wealthy after the divorce. I studied the documents. Hotel receipts, dinner bills, charges for jewelry and flowers, all paid for with money stolen from client accounts. It was a prosecutor's dream. What do you want in return for this information? I want him disbarred, and I want a reference letter for my next job. Jessica met my eyes. I've already copied everything and sent it to the Bar Association, but I thought you should know what you're dealing with. That night, Helena came home later than usual, her lipstick smudged and her hair slightly messed. She was practically humming with satisfaction. Good meeting? I asked from my spot on the couch. Very productive. Donovan thinks we can have everything finalized within a month. She kicked off her heels and stretched. He's confident we can get substantial alimony, given your limited earning potential. My limited earning potential? Oh, Pierce. Helena's voice carried that familiar, condescending tone. I know you try, but let's be realistic. You make what, 40,000 a year, maybe 50, and you have no real skills outside of staring at computer screens. I nodded thoughtfully. You're probably right. Donovan says judges are very sympathetic to wives who've been supporting underachieving husbands, especially when those wives have built successful businesses. Helena smiled. I might actually come out of this better than when we started. That's wonderful, Helena. I'm happy for you. She looked at me suspiciously, as if my calm reaction wasn't what she'd expected. But then her phone buzzed, and she was immediately distracted by whatever message had just arrived. I'm going to take a bath, she said, heading toward the stairs. Try not to wait up. After she was gone, I opened my laptop and began typing. Margaret Chen had advised me to document everything, and I'd been following her advice religiously. Every conversation, every lie, every moment of Helena's increasing arrogance was carefully recorded and dated. My phone buzzed. A text from Nina. Bar Association received anonymous complaint about Donovan. Investigation starts Monday. I smiled and typed back. Perfect timing. The next morning, Helena was unusually quiet over breakfast. She kept checking her phone, frowning at whatever she was reading. Everything okay? I asked. Donovan's not answering his messages. It's probably nothing. But she looked worried. Maybe he's busy with other clients. Maybe. Helena's frown deepened. He was supposed to file preliminary paperwork today. I nodded sympathetically, while internally counting down the hours until Donovan Price's world came crashing down around him. The Bar Association didn't mess around with trust fund violations, and Jessica's documentation was thorough enough to end his career. I'm sure it's fine, I said. These legal things always take longer than expected. Helena's phone rang. She glanced at the caller ID, and her face lit up. Donovan, I was just... Her expression changed as she listened to whatever he was saying. What do you mean postponed? What investigation? I continued eating my breakfast, fighting to keep my expression neutral as Helena's voice rose. That's ridiculous. Who would complain about you? You're one of the most respected divorce attorneys in Boston. Respected. Right. I took another sip of coffee and watched my wife's perfect world begin to crumble. Fine. Yes, I understand. Call me when you know more. Helena ended the call and stared at her phone. Problems? I asked. Someone filed a complaint against Donovan with the Bar Association. They're investigating his client relationships. Helena's voice was tight with worry. He says it's probably a disgruntled former client, but they've frozen his ability to take new cases until the investigation is complete. That sounds serious. It's harassment, is what it is. Helena stood abruptly, grabbing her purse. I need to get to the boutique. We'll figure this out. After she left, I called Margaret Chen. The investigation is moving faster than I expected, she said. Word is that they have substantial documentation. Your wife's boyfriend might be looking at disbarment. And our case? We wait. Let the Bar Association do its work. Then we file. By the time we get to court, Mr. Price will either be suspended or disbarred. Either way, he won't be representing your wife. I hung up and allowed myself a moment of satisfaction. Helena thought she was playing chess, but she'd been playing checkers, and I'd been playing an entirely different game. 2 weeks later, the Boston Globe ran a small item in their business section. Local attorney under investigation for trust fund violations. They didn't name Donovan specifically, but anyone in Boston's legal community would know exactly who they were talking about. Helena had been increasingly agitated, spending hours on the phone with Donovan and coming home from their meetings, looking frustrated instead of satisfied. The investigation was moving quickly, and according to Nina's sources, it wasn't going well for Donovan. This is all some kind of mistake, Helena announced over dinner, stabbing at her salad with unusual violence. Someone's obviously targeting Donovan because he's successful. Targeting him how? The Bar Association claims he was misappropriating client funds. It's ridiculous. Donovan would never do something like that. I nodded sympathetically. It does sound far-fetched. Exactly. Helena's eyes brightened, apparently encouraged by my support. I told him he should fight this aggressively, sue whoever filed the complaint for defamation. That's definitely an option. What Helena didn't know was that the whoever who filed the complaint was sitting across the table from her, and that the evidence against Donovan was so overwhelming that 3 other attorneys had already refused to represent him. My phone buzzed. A text from Margaret. Ready to file tomorrow. Are you prepared for what comes next? I was more than prepared. I was looking forward to it. The next morning, Helena left early for the boutique, muttering about inventory and difficult customers. I waited until her car was out of the driveway, then called Margaret. File the papers, I said. Pierce, once I do this, there's no going back. Your wife is going to be blindsided. She made her choice, Margaret. I'm making mine. 3 hours later, Helena called me, screaming, What the hell is this, Pierce? Divorce papers? Are you out of your mind? I think it's time we ended this charade, Helena. Charade? What are you talking about? I thought we were happy. I almost laughed. You thought we were happy? You've been sleeping with your lawyer for 6 months. Silence. Then, I don't know what you think you know, but I know everything, Helena. The hotels, the lies, the money you've been spending on your affair. I know about Donovan's investigation, and I know you've been telling people I'm some kind of lazy husband. Pierce, listen to me. Whatever you think is happening, I'll see you in court, Helena. Bring a good lawyer. Oh, wait, your lawyer is about to be disbarred. I hung up. 20 minutes later, Helena burst through our front door like a hurricane, her face flushed with rage. You bastard, she screamed. How dare you humiliate me like this? I looked up from my laptop calmly. Humiliate you? I haven't done anything yet. Those papers were delivered to my boutique, in front of my employees, in front of customers. I'm sorry about the timing. I asked Margaret to have them delivered here, but apparently you weren't home. Helena's eyes were wild with fury. You think you're so smart, don't you? You think you can just throw around accusations and destroy my life? I'm not destroying anything, Helena. I'm just ending our marriage. Based on what? Some paranoid fantasy about Donovan and me? I opened my laptop and turned the screen toward her. On it was a photo of her and Donovan entering the Fairmont Copley Plaza, his hand on her lower back, her face turned up toward his for a kiss. Helena's face went white. Where did you get that? I took it. 3 weeks ago. Would you like to see the others? I clicked through a folder of photos, Helena and Donovan at restaurants, getting into his car, walking hand in hand through Boston Common. Her expression grew more horrified with each image. You've been following me? I've been documenting your affair. There's a difference. Helena sank onto the couch, her anger replaced by something that looked like fear. Pierce, you don't understand. Donovan and I, it's not what you think. It's exactly what I think. You've been cheating on me while planning to divorce me and take half of everything I own. The only problem with your plan is that you didn't bother to find out what I actually own. What are you talking about? I smiled. You'll find out in court. That evening, Mara Chen showed up at our house, her face twisted with indignation. I watched through the window as she and Helena stood in our driveway, gesturing wildly and clearly plotting their next move. When Helena came back inside, Mara was with her. Pierce, Mara said, her voice dripping with false sympathy, Helena told me about your episode today. I think you're having some kind of breakdown. Am I? This paranoia about Helena and Donovan is clearly a cry for help. You're obviously feeling inadequate about your career situation, and you're lashing out at the people who care about you. I looked at Helena. Is that the story we're going with? Pierce, please, Helena said, her voice softer now, more manipulative. I know you're struggling with your self-esteem, your job situation, the money problems. It's understandable that you'd start imagining things. Money problems? Mara jumped in. Helena told me you've been having trouble at work, that your boss has been criticizing your performance. I stared at both of them, amazed by their audacity. And what exactly did Helena tell you about my job? That you're some kind of data entry clerk, Mara said dismissively, making barely enough to cover your expenses. Data entry clerk. Pierce, there's no shame in it, Helena said quickly. Not everyone can be successful in business. But that doesn't mean you should sabotage our marriage because you're feeling insecure. I stood up slowly. Get out. What? Both of you. Get out of my house. Pierce, be reasonable, Helena started. Get out. They left, but not before Mara turned back and said, You're going to regret this, Pierce. Helena's been too good to you for too long. When this goes to court, everyone's going to see what you really are. I watched them drive away, then called Nina. How did it go? She asked. They think I'm a data entry clerk having a mental breakdown. Nina laughed. Oh, this is going to be fun. 6 weeks later, I sat in Suffolk County Family Court, watching Helena and her new attorney prepare for what they clearly thought would be an easy victory. Donovan Price was conspicuously absent. His law license had been suspended pending the outcome of his criminal investigation, and Helena had been forced to find new representation. Her new lawyer was Robert Kim, a competent but unspectacular attorney who specialized in protecting the rights of financially vulnerable spouses. Helena had chosen him specifically because of his reputation for getting large alimony awards for wives married to high-earning husbands. The irony was delicious. Helena sat at the plaintiff's table wearing a conservative navy dress and an expression of wounded dignity. She'd lost weight over the past month, and there were dark circles under her eyes that makeup couldn't quite hide. The stress of Donovan's disgrace and the impending divorce had clearly taken its toll. Mara sat in the gallery behind Helena, shooting poisonous looks in my direction. She'd apparently appointed herself Helena's chief supporter, and had been spreading rumors around Boston's social circles about my mental instability and financial desperation. Margaret Chen sat beside me, calm and professional in her tailored gray suit. At 55, Margaret was one of the most respected family law attorneys in Massachusetts, with a reputation for thorough preparation and devastating cross-examinations. Remember, she whispered, let them make their case first. Don't react, no matter what they say about you. Judge Patricia Morrison called the court to order. Judge Morrison was in her early 60s, with steel-gray hair and the kind of sharp intelligence that came from 30 years of seeing every possible variation of human stupidity and greed. This is a dissolution of marriage proceeding, Judge Morrison began. Sterling versus Sterling. Mr. Kim, you may present your client's case. Robert Kim stood, adjusting his tie nervously. He'd clearly been briefed by Helena about my supposed financial situation, and his entire strategy was built around portraying her as the successful businesswoman married to an underachieving husband. Your Honor, my client Helena Sterling has been married to the defendant for 7 years. During that time, she has built a successful business while supporting her husband, who has struggled to maintain steady employment in his field. I watched Helena nod sadly, playing the part of the long-suffering wife. Mrs. Sterling is seeking reasonable alimony to maintain the standard of living established during the marriage, as well as an equitable distribution of marital assets. The defendant's earning capacity is limited, but Mrs. Sterling has been the primary breadwinner throughout their relationship. Judge Morrison made a note. And what is Mr. Sterling's current employment situation? He works as a data analyst for a financial firm. His income is approximately $40,000 to $50,000 annually. I felt Margaret tense slightly beside me, but I kept my expression neutral. Helena had clearly briefed her new attorney based on her assumptions about my job, and Kim was presenting those assumptions as facts. Mrs. Sterling, on the other hand, owns and operates a successful boutique business with annual revenues exceeding $200,000. I see, Judge Morrison said. And you're seeking what amount in alimony? Given the disparity in earning capacity, we believe $4,000 monthly is reasonable, along with a 50% split of all marital assets. Judge Morrison turned to Margaret. Ms. Chen, how does your client respond to these requests? Margaret stood gracefully. Your Honor, we contest both the alimony request and the asset distribution based on several factors that opposing counsel seems to be unaware of. Such as the actual nature of Mr. Sterling's employment and compensation, and such as Mrs. Sterling's violation of the prenuptial agreement executed before their marriage. Helena's head snapped up. Kim looked confused. Prenuptial agreement? Kim whispered loudly to Helena. Your Honor, Margaret continued, we have documentation showing that Mrs. Sterling has been engaged in an extramarital affair for the past 8 months, which constitutes a material breach of the prenuptial agreement's fidelity clause. Objection! Kim jumped up. There's no evidence of any affair. Margaret opened her briefcase and pulled out a thick folder. Your Honor, I have photographs, hotel receipts, phone records, and testimony from multiple witnesses documenting Mrs. Sterling's relationship with her former attorney, Donovan Price. Judge Morrison's eyebrows rose. Donovan Price? The attorney currently under investigation by the Bar Association? The same, Your Honor. Helena's face had gone completely white. She grabbed Kim's arm and whispered frantically in his ear. Your Honor, Kim said weakly, even if there were some kind of relationship, it doesn't negate my client's right to reasonable support. Actually, it does, Margaret said smoothly. The prenuptial agreement specifically states that adultery voids any claim to alimony and limits asset distribution to premarital property only. Judge Morrison looked at Helena. Mrs. Sterling, were you aware of the terms of your prenuptial agreement? Helena stood shakily. Your Honor, The agreement was signed a long time ago. I don't remember all the details. But you do remember signing it? Yes, but... And you were represented by counsel when you signed it? Helena's voice was barely a whisper. Yes. Judge Morrison made another note. Ms. Chen, you mentioned Mr. Sterling's actual employment situation. Would you care to clarify that for the court? This was the moment I'd been waiting for. Margaret smiled. Certainly, Your Honor. Mr. Sterling is not a data analyst. He is a senior partner at Meridian Capital, one of Boston's most prestigious investment firms. His annual compensation for the current year is $680,000. The courtroom went completely silent. Helena's mouth fell open. Mara gasped audibly from the gallery. Even Kim looked stunned. $680,000? Judge Morrison repeated. Yes, Your Honor. Mr. Sterling specializes in high-frequency algorithmic trading and manages portfolios worth over $400 million. Helena was staring at me as if she'd never seen me before. Her face had gone from white to red to white again. "Wait," she said loudly. "How much?" Judge Morrison looked at her sternly. "Mrs. Sterling, please remain seated unless asked to speak." But Helena was beyond caring about courtroom protocol. She turned to stare at me, her voice rising. $680,000? That's impossible. You work in some little office doing computer stuff. You're nobody. "Mrs. Sterling," Judge Morrison's voice cracked like a whip. "Control yourself or I'll hold you in contempt." But Helena was spiraling. "This is insane. Pierce makes nothing. He sits at home playing video games. He's useless. Completely useless." Kim was tugging at Helena's arm, trying to get her to sit down, but she shook him off. "Tell them, Pierce. Tell them what you really do. Tell them about your pathetic little job." I stood slowly, my voice calm and steady. "Your Honor, I'd be happy to provide documentation of my employment and compensation." Margaret handed Judge Morrison a folder. "Tax returns for the past 3 years, employment contracts, and a letter from Meridian Capital's managing director confirming Mr. Sterling's position and current salary." Judge Morrison reviewed the documents, while Helena continued to stare at me in shock. Finally, she whispered, "Wait, how much?" "Mrs. Sterling," Judge Morrison said firmly, "you've already asked that question. The answer hasn't changed." Helena sank into her chair, looking like she might faint. Mara was whispering frantically to someone on her phone, probably spreading the news of Helena's humiliation to their entire social circle. "Your Honor," Margaret continued, "given Mrs. Sterling's breach of the prenuptial agreement and the significant disparity in their actual earning capacity, we request that the court deny all claims for alimony and limit asset distribution according to the terms of the prenuptial agreement." Judge Morrison looked at Kim. "Does opposing counsel have any response?" Kim looked like he wanted to crawl under the table. "Your Honor, we need time to review this new information." "New information?" Judge Morrison's voice was sharp. "Mr. Kim, didn't you research your client's husband's employment before filing this case? We relied on information provided by Mrs. Sterling. Information that was completely incorrect." "Yes, Your Honor." Judge Morrison turned back to Helena, who was still staring at me in shock. "Mrs. Sterling, did you deliberately misrepresent your husband's income to your attorney?" Helena's voice was barely audible. He never said he made $680,000 a year, so you assumed he made $40,000. He works with computers. I thought." Judge Morrison's expression was a mixture of disbelief and disgust. "Mrs. Sterling, you've been married to this man for 7 years. How could you not know what he does for a living?" Helena had no answer. She just sat there, looking smaller and more defeated by the minute. "Furthermore," Judge Morrison continued, "the evidence of your extramarital affair appears to be substantial. Do you deny having a relationship with Donovan Price?" Helena looked at Kim desperately, but he just shook his head. "No, Your Honor," she whispered. "Then this court finds that you have materially breached the terms of your prenuptial agreement. Your request for alimony is denied, and asset distribution will be limited to premarital property as specified in the agreement." Helena's face crumpled. "Your Honor, please, I made a mistake, but I can't survive without support. My business is failing and Donovan can't help me anymore. Mrs. Sterling, you made several mistakes. You cheated on your husband, you lied about his income, and you wasted this court's time with frivolous claims. The prenuptial agreement you signed protects Mr. Sterling's assets in exactly this situation." Judge Morrison banged her gavel. "Divorce granted. Next case." As we filed out of the courtroom, Helena grabbed my arm. "Pierce, please, we need to talk." I looked down at her hand, then at her face. "There's nothing to talk about, Helena. You can't just leave me with nothing." "I'm not leaving you with nothing. I'm leaving you with exactly what you brought to this marriage. which, according to the prenuptial agreement you signed, is your boutique and whatever money you had in your personal accounts. My boutique is failing, and Donovan spent most of my savings. I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. That sounds like a problem you should have considered before you decided to cheat on me. Helena's desperation turned back to anger. You bastard! You let me humiliate myself in there. You knew what you made, and you let me walk into that courtroom thinking you were poor. You never asked what I made, Helena. In 7 years of marriage, you never once asked about my actual job or my actual salary. You made assumptions, and you based your entire affair on those assumptions. Mara appeared beside Helena, her face twisted with rage. This isn't over, Pierce. Everyone's going to know what kind of man you really are. I looked at both of them. Helena, who'd thrown away a marriage to a man worth nearly 7 figures for an affair with a criminal, and Mara, who'd spent months spreading lies about my supposed failures. You're right, Mara. Everyone is going to know exactly what kind of man I am, just like they're going to know exactly what kind of women you are. I walked away, leaving them standing in the courthouse hallway, their perfect little world in ruins around them. Outside, Margaret was waiting by her car. How do you feel? She asked. I thought about it for a moment. Satisfied. No regrets? None at all. Margaret smiled. Good. Because Helena's going to try to appeal this, and when she does, she's going to discover that Massachusetts courts don't look kindly on adultery or perjury. I shook Margaret's hand and walked to my own car. As I drove home to my empty house, I thought about Helena's face when she'd learned the truth about my income. The shock, the disbelief, the dawning realization